Hello everyone! Now, as you can see from the title of today's video, it's going to be all about books that have spawned a TV series. So obviously there are loads that could fit into this category, however I'm just going to go with today the ones that I've either watched recently or seen recently. I'm going to be starting off with one that's probably the most famous book to TV adaptation, and that is Game of Thrones. So the TV series is named after the first book in the series A Song of Ice and Fire, which is technically a Game of Thrones, but they dropped the A for the TV series, and as this particular copy is based on the TV series, it's also dropped the A, but it is supposed to be a Game of Thrones. So I could probably do an entire video on Game of Thrones alone, so I'm going to try and keep it relatively short for this review, but basically the first series is pretty similar to the book, if not a lot more condensed, but the general plot, the general characters introduced are very similar. However, as the TV series goes on, it branches out further and further from the books, and so fans of the book, like myself, can get a bit annoyed at that because they miss out some very important scenes, they kill off some characters that shouldn't be killed off, and they don't kill off some characters that should be killed off, and generally the whole theme of it gets very different. So the way I kind of look at it is if they're two separate entities, so I can enjoy the TV series very separately to the way I enjoy the books. I would definitely recommend reading A Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, you should be aware they are thick, chunky books, but there's no point at which you're like, oh, this is taking forever. Like, you know, you're always engaged when you're reading those books. George R.R. Martin has such an engaging, beautifully written style. It's just absolutely incredible. It completely transports you. So when you're reading, you were just inside the book, you know, you're not thinking, I don't know, I should be making the dinner, I should be going out. You're not focusing on anything else apart from the world you're in. So the fact that they're too long is actually a good thing, really. At the moment there are technically 5 books, although 2 of them are split into 2 parts, so I guess 7. The Winds of Winter is supposed to be coming out relatively soon, but it's supposed to be coming out relatively soon for the past few years, and it's taken 20 years for him to write the series so far, so it's probably going to be a long wait. But when you sort of read the books, you realise where all that time is going. They are incredibly in-depth. You know, I don't think I've ever read a book that's put so much detail in creating such a vivid world. Like, you get to know the characters, the world, you get to know basically everything. You know, you could really picture yourself in that world, and you only see a very small part of that on the TV series. So I would say, you know, if you don't like reading long books, then fair enough, but do be aware this series isn't particularly representative of the books, and you do get a completely new experience when you read them. So next up, we have Darkly Dreaming Dexter, which, as I'm sure you can guess, was the inspiration for the TV series Dexter, not to be confused with Dexter's Lab, because that would be a very different show if that was the case. So basically, this book is brilliant. I love it, and the thing I love the most is the fact that it's kind of like straight from the perspective of Dexter the whole way, just like the TV series is. So you really get to understand his motivations, his characteristics, and the writing itself is just really high quality. It's beautiful. It just creates a scene, a setting. It's not needlessly whimsical like that statement was, but it sets the scene, it tells you what you need to know, it is engaging, it creates an experience for you, and it's got great humour. Like, with the TV series, you're going to be laughing a little bit just at, like, Dexter's inner monologue, and it's exactly the same with the book. It's just, yeah, totally worth a read, like, nice and short, so it wouldn't take you too long, and, yeah, if you're a fan of the TV series Dexter, or honestly, even if you're not, if you just like kind of gory stories with a likeable main character, then yeah, definitely recommend Darkly Dreaming Dexter. It's in a series, so if you do like it, there's plenty of other Dexter books for you to enjoy. So yeah, Darkly Dreaming Dexter by Jeff Lindsay. So the next book I'm going to discuss is not here because I took it to the charity shop because it was garbage. So one of my favourite shows, and you're going to judge me for this, but I don't care, one of my favourite shows is The Vampire Diaries. It is absolute teen trash, but I love it. Yeah, I can't, there's no redeeming factors for it really, but it is enjoyable. It's kind of like a love story, but not just about love. Like, there's lots of action, there's lots of really cool plot, there's lots of characters, and yeah, I mean, it's really not something I'm proud to admit to liking, but I do. So when I saw the book, I thought, oh cool, because like it was a book first and they adapted it to a TV series, and I've got to say, the person who adapted it to a TV series that is watchable from that absolute pile of trash is just a genius, because the book is, like, it's awful. The writing is, I could have done that in like year 10. It is just childish, pathetic. There's not a single likeable character. Like, none of the characters are anything like they are in the show. Like, you might not like Elena in the show, but at least she's got a personality. In the book, she's just this shallow, rich, entitled kid who's like mean to everyone, even her friends. Yeah, she's just the worst. Like, pretty much the only similarity between the book and the TV show is that some of them have the same names. Like, the love story between Elena and Stefan in the books is just so weird and forced, and there's no connection between them whatsoever. The way Damon's introduced is just unusual and odd. Like, none of it flows. It's like reading these separate chapters that have nothing to do with each other. There's no consistent storyline in the book. The characters are just awful, the writing is just awful, and honestly I just trudged my way through the first one and I was like, no, that's it. So I did not read the rest of the series. But yeah, definitely wouldn't recommend reading the Vampire Diaries books if you are a fan of the Vampire Diaries. However, if you're also a fan of the originals, which is the spin-off of the Vampire Diaries, I would recommend the trilogy based on the TV show. So the first one in that trilogy is called The Rise, and yeah, it's really good. I was quite surprised, to be honest. I kind of got them as a novelty thing because I do like the show and I thought, oh, this would be a bit of fun. But actually, it's a really clever plot. So it's from the perspectives of Klaus, Rebecca and Elijah, who are 3 of the original vampires. And it's kind of like, it's a canon story based on their past, but it's a story we haven't heard before, so it is all new. And it's really interesting. Like, they've got the characters just right. You can totally imagine them thinking and feeling these things. And yeah, so I'll definitely recommend it. If you're a fan of the Vampire Diaries, skip the Vampire Diaries books, go for the spin-off originals trilogy instead. So going for a more popular author this time, Stephen King. Like, basically everyone's heard of him, and the book is 11/22/63, which is the day that JFK was shot, and that's what the book's about. So basically, it's a time travel story. So this guy in kind of like the modern age, he goes back in time to try and prevent the assassination of JFK. And it was recently adapted into a one-series TV show starring James Franco, and I watched that recently. It was incredible. Like, it was such a brilliant, engaging show. I loved the choices by the producer and the director. It was really cleverly done. The acting was superb. The characters were really, like, engaging and three-dimensional. You really connected with their storylines and you really saw it from their points of view. And yeah, it was just brilliant. The book is even better, I would say, like, because it just gives you so much more. Obviously, there's only so much they can do with the story in one series of TV, whereas the book is a really thick book, so they've captured so much within it. There are a few differences, most notably the fact that in the TV show, Jake goes back in time once and like he has to just do it and get it done basically, whereas in the book he sort of test runs quite a lot to sort of try out different things and see how it goes. Also in the TV show they go back to 1960, in the book he goes back to 1958, which gives him 5 years rather than 3, because I think in the TV show they just kind of wanted to, obviously they've got such a short space of time to fit it all into, so they wanted to try and condense it a bit more. There's also a massive time jump in the TV show where they kind of just skip over Jake being kind of a teacher in the 1960s, whereas that's milked a lot more in the book and you really get to see a lot more of his life and realise that actually he finds himself in the past. Like, he realises he belongs there, whereas that's not played as well in the TV show because they just don't give it as much emphasis. So I would have liked to seen some more stuff of Jake being a teacher in the TV show, just to kind of really build that world and build that sense of this is where he belongs. The love story, though, is played fantastically in the TV show. You really get that sense that they are made for each other, they're soulmates, there's that connectedness. And again, in the books, you've really got... It's really beautiful the way the characters come together. I'd say another main difference in the TV show, there's this guy called the Yellow Card Man, which is... He's kind of like a cautionary tale, whereas in the books there's multiple of them and they've got different coloured cards and they represent different things, whereas in the TV show it's always the same guy sort of popping up at different points throughout Jake's journey, kind of warning him, you know, you shouldn't be changing time, you can't do this. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but yeah, it does create a slight difference in the feeling between the book and the TV show, but they are both fantastic and well worth it. Like, definitely recommend this pretty much for anyone really. Even if you're not like interested in what happened with JFK, it's still a really interesting read because the characterization is so superb and it's really cool. Like, it really gets into what the 60s was about. Like, obviously I wasn't about in the 60s, but from what I understand, this is a good representation of the 60s. And again, with the TV show, it's only 9 episodes. definitely worth a watch. So I'm going to sort of break apart from the book of this video. I'm going to go for a graphic novel. So we've got Archie. Now, that is the, Riverdale was based on the original Archie comics, which have been going for absolutely decades. This is the rebooted Archie comics, and this is volume 1 of it. There's 6 volumes so far, I believe. I believe 7's coming out either soon, or it might be out, I need to double check. But I've got the first 6 so far, and I absolutely love the style of them. Like, the comic style is really colourful, the characters are sort of very well drawn, and one of my favourite things about this copy is that they have loads of different potential cover arts that could have gone on the front, and I love seeing all the different variations, because for me, when I read a graphic novel, if it doesn't have good art, I'm not going to bother reading it, because even though I do like the story and the story is important, the reason I'm going for a graphic novel is because I want to be transported through a world through pictures, and that's what this does really well. I must confess I never actually read the original Archie comics, and I got into these ones because of the series Riverdale. But yeah, these are absolutely fantastic for anyone who enjoys sort of comic graphic novel style. The writing is humorous, it's not too much dialogue, not too little. The pictures really tell a story, you can really see what's going on. The characters are really quirky in their drawing style, like, I think they just convey so much character, and it is quite different from the show as well. Like, it's based on the same characters and in the same place, but the storylines are very different. So in the comics, the sort of backstory is that Archie and Betty have been together for a very long time and then have recently broken up when Veronica arrives. Veronica in the books as well is like a more caricatured version of herself than she is in the show. So in the show, she is kind of like a rich, snobby girl, but she's got more character to her, whereas in this, she is just rich snobby girl, that's it, you know, she's just has no idea what normal people do, and it is quite funny sort of watching her with Archie, who's obviously a very down-to-earth kind of guy, and seeing how they connect with each other. I think one of the things that makes Riverdale as a show so popular is the fact that it creates quite a unique style in which it's kind of dark but also humorous. It has light-hearted moments, it focuses on very small struggles like relationships, and then very large grown stories like the overarching themes of it, for example, Jason's death in the first season, and I'm not going to sort of give away anything else from the other seasons in case you haven't seen them yet, but basically it somehow sees the largeness in small situations and the microscopic details of larger situations, and it kind of builds them up as the story goes on, which I think is really clever. And it's quite similar in this. The comics don't focus on such deep issues like murder as the show does, but it does create a story, and it is quite a clever story that I do like. It captures the quirkiness of the show quite well. The characters really portray expression and feeling, and you really get the sense that you know their personalities just like you do in the show. But yeah, definitely, if you like Riverdale, I would say definitely do go for these, because they do sort of capture that same feeling. Like I said, I can't comment on the original Archie comics they were based off, but I've heard that they're very good, so yeah, try them out, I suppose. And the final book that I'm going to talk about is the source material for a show that has generated a lot of discussion about morality and things, and that is You. So the premise of You is that there's this guy, Joe Goldberg, who is absolutely obsessed with this woman he met in his bookshop, and her name is Beck, and he's a stalker, essentially. And the interesting thing about this, as opposed to other books that may confront the issue of stalking, is that this is from the first-person view of Joe as the stalker, and it almost makes him seem like, not a normal guy, but like, it's very hard to describe, but he doesn't come across as a stalker. Like, when you see the scenes that are just other people's perceptions of him in the show, you kind of almost root for the guy. You know, he's very likeable, he's very charming, he seems like a very decent guy, but the stuff he's doing is just absolutely not okay. You know, stalking, even killing at certain points. And as you can see in the book, I haven't actually finished it yet. I've got the bookmark still in it, so I am still reading it. There are a few differences in the book. Most notably, in the show, you've got this kid, Paco, who his parents, his mum's basically being abused by his stepdad, and Joe's trying to help him. And in the books, his character is kind of replaced by Curtis, who's a guy who works at Joe's bookshop. We also see a lot more of the backstory between Joe and Mr. Mooney, which is the guy who used to own the bookshop. In the show, we don't see it as much. We sort of see some snapshots of when he was younger. So Mr. Mooney used to trap Joe in a cage, literally. And Joe, in the show, it seems almost like he resented him for it, whereas in the books, you can see how completely brainwashed Joe was by that he really does think it's okay and that it was better for him. And we sort of see more about how Joe has become the person that he has. One thing that's very interesting about the book is the style of writing when it's from the first person view of Joe. It's completely run on sentences. It is just his thoughts as they happen. It's very fascinating to read, because in the show they're very obviously stylized and dramatized, whereas in the book it's just thoughts come into his head, it's gone onto the paper, there's no logical flow to it. And I think that's actually quite clever in building someone you can actually believe is a real person. And it also helps that you notice straight away he is creepy. Like, in the show it's hard to get the creepiness because he is acted so well as a normal person who's trying to come across that, and as a viewer we see those scenes and the only creepiness we get is from the voiceover, whereas in the book we get a lot of the creepiness because we get a lot of the thoughts in there. And so yeah, you realise, wow, this is not the kind of dude you want to meet. But yeah, definitely worth a read. Like I said, I haven't quite finished it yet, but I'm absolutely loving it so far, staying up late to try and get another chapter in kind of deal. But yeah, definitely recommend reading You. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it has been interesting for you. I would love to hear your thoughts on the books that I've mentioned today, as well as any other books that have had TV shows based on them, what you sort of thought, how you liked the differences, that kind of thing. Mention it down in the comments below. Like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. But yeah, see you next time, guys. Bye bye.